Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Jason Simpson, CEO of Raw Charging, the destination charging experts. Coming up on today's show, Jason tells us one of his favourite things.
Really expensive toilet paper.
Phil delves into controversy.
And I wasn't sure if you wanted to go there, but you've gone there, so...
And Jason recounts an unexpected story from his journey.
And they started clanking as they were walking.
All that and so much more as we chat through Jason's superb story so far. Jason has a cracking story, having worked all around the world in a number of different sectors, and our chat just blew my mind. I have no doubt that you're all going to take something away from this chat, whether that's education around electric vehicles or his brilliant anecdotes. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy!
And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Jason Simpson.
Phil, nice to speak to you.
Indeed, how are you doing?
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
It's nice to come down after the New Year's and Christmas and actually could have get back into the office.
Indeed, we were talking about that before we switched the microphone, aren't we, about the fact that today I'm wearing a waistcoat. Somebody once told me that I used to do the bottom button up all the way down, and then somebody said, etiquette-wise, that's not right.
Perfect.
And I was like, oh, for this time of year, that's amazing.
That's why I wear navy, just to try and hide the the bump.
Yes, well, we're both of a certain age where things become tougher to maintain as well,
Indeed.
don't they?
Yeah.
But so for the uninitiated out there, just tell the world what it is that you actually do.
So I'm CEO of Raw Charging. So Raw Charging is a business that's been in the electric vehicle charging industry for about 6-7 years now. We're owned by an infrastructure fund, a UK French infrastructure fund, and basically we work with partners in leisure, hospitality, retail to put in electric vehicle charging to serve their clients. So we're very much trying to insert the electric vehicle charging into the journey of our partners, whether that be someone visiting Merlin Entertainments, going to Alton Towers or to Legoland, as part of their day, they want to charge their car, but we want to make it sort of integrated in that journey, or whether it's someone visiting a hotel and needing a charge for the car overnight, or going to MacArthur Glen to shop, or National Trust to have a nice, walk and a visit. So so that's what we do. I guess in some ways, and hence the reason why I have an infrastructure investor, is we will actually invest in all the technology, the equipment, we'll do the installation, and we will sort of own and operate those assets for a long period of time, making sure that we're hitting the right service level agreements, that we're hitting all the regulations and a whole bunch of other stuff that comes with operating charge points and providing that service, and making sure that it gives a great service for the host, their clients and their visitors, and at the same stage making it's a long-term investment, so it's also probably more attractive financially for the partners we work with.
Yeah, and I read a blog, I think, that you wrote yourself, in fact, when I was doing my research, which occasionally I do, and that was centred around the fact that there is perhaps this expectation in the world at the moment that it's kind of one-size-fits-all approach, and, that there's charging falls into, basically fast charging, slightly slower charging, and slow charging, and that's the end of it. And so you pick one and you go with it, and actually fast charging might not be what you think it is, and I was actually really interested to learn about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think because we come a world of petrol stations, everyone tends to kind of assume that it's just about filling your tank. But with, a lot of the energy transition, and sort of there's a whole big sustainable journey around that, trying to reduce emissions and improve air quality and move away from fossil fuels and so on. But all of that, at the heart of all that is trying to electrify. Because that allows us to tap into renewables like solar and wind and so on. So when it gets down to that, it then becomes, depending on your use case and depending on your journey, you need a different charging experience. So the best place in the world to charge, if you can, is at home. If you're lucky enough to have a driveway and you can park up in your driveway, you plug it in into your house. You need a kind of a proper bit of kit. But it's not. It's not
just the wall.
Not just the wall or the 3-pin plug set.
Yes, I saw how slow that was with my Polestar.
Well,
earlier on this year. Yeah.
Exactly, that could take you all week to charge. But assuming you've got a proper bit of charging kit at home, it's the cheapest way of charging your car. It'll cost you I don't know, 7 pence a kilowatt hour, so you might be running a couple of pence a mile, so really, peanuts. You can charge it overnight. It's just like plugging in, your phone. Do it overnight. It's very convenient, very easy. So, where people can, they will charge at home. Having said that, not everyone has a driveway. So people need to, for example, charge if they, like I do, I park on the street. So there are charging companies who charge, who provide overnight charging, working with local authorities. So the last company I set up was doing that. And of course, as you said, people want to be charging on the go, so like motorways. But when you're charging on a motorway, you do want that to be fast.
Yeah, because you're generally on the way somewhere.
You're on the way somewhere. You've stopped off specifically. You might want to go and get coffee, use the toilet, stretch the legs. But you don't want to hang around there for hours. So therefore, you want to do that fast. However, there's a cost to that. Because you're going to pay, just like you pay today, petrol and motorway service stations are much more expensive. Likewise, if you want a really, really fast charge, there's a lot more infrastructure that gets put into that. You're taking a lot more power and so on. So that's quite an expensive way of charging. And then you get to where you're going. And that could be, the hotel, the entertainment park, the shopping venue, your friends, your family, whatever it might be. And that's your other option to charge because, you've used up some of your battery. You want to, you're going to go back or keep driving somewhere. And that could be a slow charge. Because typically you're there for a few hours, might be there overnight, an afternoon, and so on. And therefore you don't actually need a fast charge. It's cheaper. It's friendlier to the grid. It's typically more renewable because if you do an overnight charge, you're tapping into the wind that, the UK produces a lot of the energy that's produced overnight. So it's just a much more sustainable, convenient and cheaper way of charging.
Right.
So I think people will choose different use cases for what they need. So you're right, speed is not everything. And in many cases, actually, a sensibly slower charge is a more efficient charge.
Yeah.
Having said that, you don't want to be at a point where you have to wait hours and hours to get a charge because that's not helpful either.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the maybe a myth that needs to be busted. And it needs to be busted in my own head, I think, as well, perhaps, is that, and this is one of the things that I think has stopped us. We're a one-car family, so we haven't moved. We don't have the confidence to move into an electrical vehicle as our only car. And the purpose of that is because we like our staycations, usually 5 or 6 hours drive away. The perception is then, we'll have to stop somewhere on the way and wait longer and all of that kind of stuff. But I suppose what you're saying is that it's probably not waiting that much longer if you're willing to take a fast charge, go in and do your business and have a coffee and all of that. And by the time you're done, you've probably got enough back in to complete your journey. And then you can figure it all out when you get to the other end.
I mean, it's interesting. Even though I run an EV charging company, this is my second one now, I don't see myself. I'm not a kind of a tech head. I'm not a kind of a really super early adopter. I was much more of a petrolhead back in my youth.
Yeah.
And so electric vehicles. I live in London now, so I spent what I do drive around. A lot of it's kind of going around in traffic and things like that. And actually, electric vehicles great for that. It's like a go-kart. It's silent. It's easy. Just what you need. But people, I think, people have this concern they're not always going to be charged everywhere. I think that has changed now. So the infrastructure that a lot of the charging companies have put in place over the last kind of 2, 3, 4 years, it means that charging is largely ubiquitous. Whether that be a rapid charge when you're on the road, or whether that be a kind of what would be called a fast charge when you're at home or somewhere else. So I think all that infrastructure is in place. And interesting enough, I was at an event not long ago where the head of EV products from Mini was speaking, and they did a survey of the Mini customers before they bought an EV or who were considering an EV.
Right.
And they said, what are your main concerns? And there were 3 concerns. One was the price of the vehicle, because EVs historically have been more expensive. Secondly was range anxiety. Is it what you're talking about? Is it going to get me where I need to get to? And third was charging anxiety.
Yeah.
When I get to where I need to get to on the way, is there a charge point I can use and so on? So they did that survey, and they were the 3 things that stood out. And then they resurveyed the people who had then bought an electric Mini 3 months later. And the only one that stayed was the cost.
Really? Right.
Range anxiety was no longer an issue. Charging anxiety, no longer an issue.
Yeah.
And even the costs, we're going to start seeing, the number of new models that are coming onto the market. Already in the last 6 months, but even in the next 12 months is enormous and a lot more interesting prices. The government standing behind its SALSAC, so salary sacrifice scheme, which is very tax advantageous. So a lot of people are buying either through leases or through salary sacrifice schemes. So that's very good for the electric model because they're a bit more expensive up front historically, but the running costs are tiny.
Yeah.
Compared to a normal petrol or diesel car, there's just so fewer parts. There's so, it's just, the tyres are probably the first thing to go, and that's quite a few years down the road.
Yeah.
So that works out in the leasing model because they can spread the total cost of upfront and the rest over the life of the vehicle. So I think, we're already seeing it in the numbers. I mean, we were just talking about that earlier, but December, almost 1 in 3 of all new cars were electric, full electric.
Yeah, I find that remarkable.
Yeah, 31%.
Yeah.
And I think another 9% or just under that were plug-in hybrids. So as in, with a battery, but and a petrol engine. And I think that's a bit of a flash in the pan. I think that will, within a couple of years, I think hybrids won't be around. It'll all go electric.
It's I suppose the half move over into.
Yeah, it's given people a bit of a comfort factor. It's sort of the comfort blanket.
Yeah.
But the reality is, why would you want a motor and an engine in the same vehicle and a load of batteries?
Yeah, unless it's a Lamborghini or something like that, because I think that adds an extra something into the acceleration, doesn't it?
Well, it's interesting to say that, because I think it was last year or the year before, 50% of Ferraris were hybrids sold globally.
I did not know that. Right.
And I think, and it's interesting, it's not a plug-in hybrid.
Yeah.
I don't. And I think the reason they did it was it started getting embarrassing that their standard car could get beaten off the post by a Tesla.
Right, yeah, indeed. Why would you want a Ferrari, right?
So they took a leaf out of Formula One's book,
yeah,
and have stuck a hybrid, motor to capture the braking and so on.
Yeah.
So they've done it for performance reasons,
yeah,
rather than kind of environmental reasons, sustainability reasons. Yeah, and you look at Range Rover, for example. I mean, they had a hybrid Range Rover. I mean, the battery would barely charge your radio at a push. But now Range Rover this year launching a full electric.
Right,
Range Rover.
Yeah. Well, it shows you everybody's taking it seriously.
The only people, everyone is taking it seriously. There's a lot of bad press out there for electric vehicles, but that's largely driven by quite a few oil and gas interests.
Of course.
Who have, and car manufacturers who haven't, the ones that haven't been ready for the jump.
Yeah.
Or chose a different path, wrong path like hydrogen.
Yeah, they lead to this skepticism around, this will never work, we can't hit these, because basically we're going to lose a ton of money if we go that way.
Exactly. So it's almost the Jeremy Clarkson, but it will come. I mean, I was speaking at, so we don't just work with hospitality, but also we work with attractions, so people like Merlin and so on. I was speaking at one of the attractions events recently, and must have been, 100, 150 people in the room. And I sort of said, how many of you have an electric vehicle or maybe a hybrid? And maybe a couple of percent stood up.
Right.
Which was a bit lower than maybe what the current market is overall. And then I sort of said, okay, the third of you in this part of this right-hand side of the room, can you all stand up? And so they all stood up and everyone's looking around at each other. I said, okay, that's going to be your car park in 4 or 5 years' time.
Right.
A third of your cars in your car park, give or take, are going to be electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And those people are going to want to charge somewhere. And the most convenient, easiest, cheapest way, them charging is actually at the place they're staying, or in this case, the attractions where they're visiting.
Especially if you're going to leave the car for a few hours.
What? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you don't address that, in effect, those people, they're going to charge on the way because they're not going to get charged when they're with you.
Yeah.
So they're going to spend money elsewhere. They're going to stop elsewhere. So they're spending less time, less money, and less satisfied than if they could charge where you are.
Yeah.
So, this concept, I mean, sometimes we meet hotels and it's sort of my next car is going to be an EV kind of story, but they'll be like, well,
been saying that for years.
Yeah, exactly. and they'll be like, well, we don't actually have charging, but there's a really good charging station a couple of minutes down the road. And that's great. But do you really want your customer sitting outside in the cold or whatever for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, when they could instead be in your nice hotel, at the bar, in the gym, relaxing in their room.
Yep.
Rather than having to kind of get back in the car, drive back down the road, or niggling in their mind, do I charge it tonight before tomorrow morning, or do I just wait till tomorrow morning? But then they're sitting over breakfast thinking, I've got to go down and charge the car. And
I have real world experience of this, in fact, because we were talking again before the microphone. I mentioned the Polestar earlier on. It's not my car. It was a hire car. And I was on a trip with my brother and we stayed in a Premier Inn. No charging points at the Premier Inn. And, all it was, I suppose, in the early stage, and I remembered a moment back in my own life whereby we used to live in central London, never had a car, always used the tubes to get everywhere. And then when we moved out of London and we needed a train to get somewhere, I remember my wife saying to me at the time, oh my God, we're going to, there's not going to be a tube coming along every 5 minutes. Yeah, we're just going to have to plan our life around the times that the train run. And it's the same principle here, is that you just have to, there might be a slight mental change that has to go through. Because I too had heard about range anxiety and charge anxiety and all of the, that kind of stuff. And I had this going into hiring this car. where are we going to charge it? But it wasn't difficult. That was the point. And especially because of the tech in the car itself, there was a button I could press that said, oh, your nearest one this has got a fast charge, a regular one, or whatever. And you just go, okay, and it's 8 miles away. And we go there and it's on the way to where we're going. And it was easy.
I think in Easter, I went out to visit a friend in Dundee, and we do the charging at St Andrews, working with the Links Trust. So I went out to visit him, and on the way up, so I must have done 1,500 miles, and I did it over a bank holiday weekend and so on. I had no problem in any way, shape, or form. I probably barely spent, so I stayed at, the hotel I stayed at happened to have charging, so problem solved on that front, which was a nice surprise. I didn't know it had. Another place I was in town, and actually there was a charge point on the street, so I just plugged in what I could, and I think I did one motorway stop. Right. And even that was like a 10-minute. It actually finished charging before it actually finished. I took a burger.
Right.
Really, and that was a long trip. And I was in Italy actually over the summer, and I did 2,500 kilometers over about 4 days, and that was all. I think maybe I did one hotel charge, but most of it was motorway.
Yeah.
And it was in the summer, so it was quite hot. But again, I was just sitting in the car, just catching up on a few emails on my phone. 15 minutes after I plugged in, I had 80% charge, and I was off. And I don't think, it's interesting. So people who stop at motorway services, only 6% of people today who stop at motorway services actually fill up their tank with petrol.
Mm. So eye-wateringly expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd much rather drive off to a Tesco's or something like that.
That's exactly that point.
Yeah.
And I think people will get to that. So today, motorway charging for electric vehicles is important. It gives people confidence. I'm on a long drive. I want to know that I can come off, I can charge.
Yeah.
What will happen very quickly, people will understood that actually they're only really going to do that if they really need to. Or maybe if it's on the company dime and they know it's going to get expensed and, and it's a work trip or stuff like that.
Right.
Outside of that, they'll charge at home. And they'll charge where they're going.
Yeah. Because
it'll be cheaper, much more convenient. And they might still stop to kind of, get a coffee, but they probably won't even bother charging.
Right. Yeah.
Because they won't need to.
Yeah.
They'll have a battery, and even battery ranges, if you really are a road warrior and you're always on the road doing long journeys, you will have a car with a big battery. And you will probably literally charge it just every night when you hit home or hit your hotel. Mm. If you're, someone, who, I know you live around town, it's basically you commute to work on the train or tube and you basically do the school runs in the car or occasional trip out, you'll have a car with a small battery. And then, once a year, if you do a long trip, you'll stop a couple of times to charge. Yeah. So I think that's that whole thing. Okay, there is a bit of a mindset, but ask anybody. I think it's like 97% of people in the UK who have had an electric vehicle will never go back to a petrol or diesel. Yeah,
I was a bit... This is not to say anything against my Qashqai, but the Polestar was quite an amazing experience.
It's just, I say to this people, okay, if I took your iPhone or your smartphone away from you, would you be happy with that? They're like, of course not. Well, why would you want to go back to a car that when you're filling it up, the fumes are coming in your face, that when you park outside your kid's school, the exhaust is going everywhere. It's a lot noisier and so. And it doesn't mean to say that, I wouldn't fancy getting on a racetrack with 12 cylinders, under the bonnet and having a cracking kind of race around the track.
Yeah.
Why not? It's a lovely experience.
Yeah.
But is that actually what you need in city driving or when you're on a motorway doing your 70 miles an hour, with all the cameras and everything else around? No, then you just want something that's quiet, easy. I remember when I did my Dundee trip, it was the same in the summer. I got out the other end. I was just like, wow, that went quick.
Yeah.
And it's just, something like the new aircraft, some of the new aircraft, I think one of the Boeings is, it flies at a much lower, the cabin pressure is much lower than because they use aluminium on the whole frame. And it just means you get to the other end. And even the pilots say, oh, it's just a completely different experience. Mm. And that's how electric feels.
Yeah.
So I think it will, people worry about, do we need incentives to help people buy electric cars and all that? I think now that, more cost-effective cars are coming into the market, people will walk with their feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, as you said, you had the Polestar for a little while. For a day-to-day car, stunning.
Yep.
And that's a premium car.
Yeah.
But even the lower cost cars are still great cars.
Ever wondered who's behind your morning coffee? Pat Coffee works closely with some of the world's most talented smallholder farms to bring you exceptional quality and unbelievably tasty coffee. Pat always pays farmers great prices for great beans, and when fairer pay means better coffee, every sip supports changing the industry for the better. Pat Coffee is available online at patcoffee.com, in Waitrose or on Ocado. They're also the coffee brand of choice for hundreds of UK hospitality businesses. To find out more about how Pat can fulfil your business's coffee needs, head to business.patcoffee.com.
Yeah, I'm guessing as well, because I was able to get a Polestar at a ridiculous deal. And I'm guessing that's because there wasn't a massive uptake on, again, this mental perception of I'm hiring a car for a trip. So I want petrol for that rather than, electrical. So that's maybe why it felt like they were it was the cheapest car for me to hire. It was quite remarkable.
I think someone told me maybe back in October, November, the Lotus, the new electric Lotus. I mean, if you like that type of kind of really sporty kind of sort of 4x4, it's a very quite an aggressive, sporty looking car. It's like 500 quid a month on lease.
Right.
Get a Lotus, 500 quid.
Yeah, I know.
And it goes faster than the old Lotus.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
So, anyway,
we've done this completely the wrong way around, but that's cool. It's cool. We just kind of got straight into it. But I am really interested as well to kind of understand how you've ended up here. I did a little bit of looking at predominantly on your LinkedIn profile, which took us back so far. I don't think it took us back the whole way. I don't know, but so take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. Studying. What did you study? How did you then get on the way, and how have you ended up here?
Okay, well, 50-something years of story to go through there, but
if you can do it in a minute, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll try that. It won't work. So, I mean, it's probably almost going back even a step slightly further than just my education. So my parents ran their own business. So I was brought up in a family business. So my father, having been left school very young, 14 years old, didn't really have much of an education. He then got an apprenticeship a few years later at Harrods, selling Persian carpets.
Right.
And Harrods in those days was a great apprenticeship. For someone with his standing, that was a real step up and into a world that he was completely new to him.
Yeah.
And so he then went on to be a carpet salesman and did very well, etc. And then one day, I think the company he was working for, a large company, got taken over, and he had basically said, look, you can stay, but we'll probably promote our people, or you get a small payoff, like redundancy, and so on. So he took that money and set up his own business selling carpet accessories, because he knew all the carpet shops.
Right.
And he didn't want to sell carpets because he didn't have the wherewithal.
Yeah.
But they needed underlay and gripper and tape and a whole bunch of other stuff and so on. So he set up and ran that business for, I think, 20-something years. Did very well out of it. And my mum was his accountant.
Right.
I mean, they're married, but she was she's a super smart lady. And so I got brought up in, I was doing, if I was bored in the summer, my mum would get me to do the double entry bookkeeping.
Wow. And you weren't bored after that either?
Well, in retrospect, I probably was. That's why I never became an accountant.
Yeah.
But it was, but I think growing up in that entrepreneurial culture, which I didn't think of it as an entrepreneur at the time, but in today's world would call that.
Yep.
And then because of that, because my parents did very well in life, I was very lucky. I got a very good education. So I went to a very good school, which is King's College School in Wimbledon. And then I was the first so I've got 21 cousins.
Wow.
So I was the first to go to university. So I was the 20th. I think my other cousin, she also went to university. So, going to university in our family was quite an unusual thing. So I studied business at Bath University, which is a fantastic town. And I spent most of the time playing sport. So I was a big hockey and tennis player and so on. So I spent a lot of time doing that. But I loved, Bath University was absolutely fantastic. And part of the program, which was really great, was you did 2 6-month internships. So the first one I did at Nuclear Electric, or consultancy, I was working for Nuclear Electric. So it's my first step into power or energy in some way, shape or form.
But not strategic at this point, just it fell in.
Yeah, fell into it,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was actually staying during the week. So I'd go up from where my parents lived near London to Knutsford, where Nuclear Electric had their head office, every Monday morning, come back on a Friday afternoon.
Right.
And I stayed at B&B on the Jodrell Bank. With the big kind of telescopers. And so that was quite a life experience. And it got me a little bit into energy. I didn't really have any perception of anything more than that at the time. And then I did another internship later for Procter & Gamble in Germany, Frankfurt. And that gave me, and even though I was quite lonely being out there, because the Germans don't have the after kind of work drinking culture, certainly not, it wasn't a city office, it was just outside of Frankfurt. But it just gave me the bug for travel. And my parents had I traveled a little bit with my parents, later on, but it was more kind of holiday travel. But actually I really enjoyed living abroad, which led to me working abroad for about 20 years, a bit later on. And then I also had the chance to go and study in Holland. So I studied at Erasmus, which is the Rotterdam Business School. So I really got into education. I then did another year in education. I think I was proving a point by that point.
Right, yeah.
Thanking my parents saying, okay, I can get this education.
Yeah. We get it. We get it. Yeah, can you get on with it now?
Exactly. And they're like, yeah, you're going to get a job at some point.
Who knows?
And so I did a further year of education, actually in engineering. And then I got a job in consulting, and I loved consulting. And I was doing a mixture of some telecoms and some energy. And this is back in the mid-90s, and energy in those days was really boring. It was utility, utility, utility. So I fell into telecoms and spent, quite a large chunk of 20 years in telecoms across the world.
Yeah.
Now, interesting enough, hospitality does fit into this, not because I didn't spend a lot of time living in hotels and traveling, which I did, but so about 2001, 2002, I met my partner at that time, and my ex-wife, and she was a food and wine travel journalist.
Oh, nice.
Having been in PR.
Sounds like the best job in the world.
Seriously. Fantastic. And her family owned and ran Peyton Hotels.
Right, okay.
And when I met her, her father, who ran, it must be one of the best hotel group owners, I've met quite a lot, and he really ran a tight ship, amazing, amazing guy. And he was looking to buy out some of the minority investors that accumulated over time. So I put a bit of money into that. And so I sort of one step removed. I saw what it was like to, run a small portfolio. It's about, I think, by the time they sold the business to I think BLD, I think there's probably 5 left in the portfolio, about 1,000 rooms. Right. So, decent size, 3-4 star, a couple of Best Westerns in there, and so on. But it was an insight. Every time I met up, I was really curious to know how the business was doing. And he really, it was a great way of understanding, balancing the investment required in the hotel, the importance of the team and the staff. He was really good at picking great GMs and also great team. And then, that got sold on to BLD Select, who I think then they got sold on themselves in a later life. So I had quite an interesting bit of exposure then. And then when I got married to my former partner, we were going to go and spend some time living abroad, just to, before thinking about kids and the like. And she got approached by someone she had known through when she was in hospitality PR, saying, actually, I've got a small luxury hotel in Morocco. Would you like to come out? For it? Yeah, would you like to come out and be the marketing manager?
Wow.
Yeah, just for a year or 6 months or whatever it might be. And Lou was like, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And she's like, but I'm married now, got a husband.
Yeah. Damn it.
Exactly. And the guy's like, well, I need a GM because I want to step back a little bit from the business.
Yeah.
I really want to hand over the day-to-day to somebody. And, I didn't really know much about anything, and I certainly hadn't come up with any training and so on. But I was young, I was enthusiastic. And,
I can do that.
I can do that.
But I suppose with that as well, though, you have the opportunity, I suppose, to also learn from somebody who might be taking a step back, but still going to be involved, I guess, and still can help guide you in the areas that you don't necessarily fully understand.
Yes.
In principle, that's the way it should work.
In principle, that's the way it should work. Quite a unique character, though.
Okay, right. There's a story here for sure.
There's plenty of stories. But I won't. It's someone who had an amazing eye. He used to say he had the third eye, and he did. The events he put on, the decor of the hotel. Just stop. Amazing. And he's very well known for it. In terms of how you operate in a hotel, and also bearing in mind this is a North African country, it was a relatively small hotel, individually owned or family owned, and so on. So
probably at that time, Morocco not fully on the tourism map as it is now.
I think it was. This is going back 2000. This would be about 2003 at this point. Okay, so Marrakesh, where we were. It's the Pal Marie had just started growing out. The Amin Jenna had turned up a few years beforehand. Some of the classic legacy hotels like the Mesnahab or the Angers, they were kind of still very much in the round, and they're still around today. So I think it was along its journey, but it's not what it at all. I was back in Marrakesh probably a year ago, and it's definitely moved on a chunk.
Yeah.
But so we spent. In the end, I think we did just a bit less than 6 months doing that, and then I realised I just wasn't up to the task. I just didn't have enough knowledge of the industry. So we found a French general manager, who had a lot of experience in North Africa, and who was married to a Moroccan who was she was a maitre d', so she was front of house. So we brought them in. I think in the end the hotel's long gone now, and so on. But it gave me a very intense insight into sort of running hotels. Especially considering, I had a team of, I think so there were probably about 20 rooms. I think there were about half a dozen big tents outside, what are called corridor tents. And I think about 4 or 5 of the team spoke French, which I, at that stage, spoke okay. Now I'm fluent. I haven't spent much of 20 years in Francophone countries, and now having a French partner, and the rest only spoke Arab. So that in itself was
challenge.
Quite a challenge.
Yeah.
But also that balance of, when you get the customer service right, that is a magic feeling. And when you get it wrong, you feel
it's not a magic feeling.
It's not a magic feeling.
Yeah.
Exactly. And because I knew what the customer side of it was like, it was very easy for me to be empathetic, to understand the service I wanted to give, even if I didn't necessarily have all the tools in the box, either my personal box or in terms of the hotel itself, in terms of the team I had and the infrastructure, to really deliver the service I would like to deliver. So we got very hot and cold sort of feedback. But I think I could do with it now, to be honest. But I think I lost in those days. I didn't have the weight to lose, but I think I lost about 2 stone in the first 2 months.
Right. Yeah.
Just trying to be everything to everybody.
Yeah. Which I suppose is an inevitable part of the learning experience as well, is that you probably felt that you kind of owe it to everybody else as well, that you have to be able to understand stuff. And that sometimes is not an overnight understanding, And
I can share a few stories, but I remember we ran a wedding. It was an international wedding, and I think it's quite a shishi event, and it was stunning. We had les hommes bleus, these local kind of Tuaregs almost dressed up in blue. We had camels in the courtyard. Just amazing, event. And apart from the fact that at one point the groom, when he was supposed to be up speaking after the bride had spoken, he was in the bushes with one of the bridesmaids.
Oh dear!
But outside of that,
having a chat about what's going to happen,
having a chat about future life and etc. And we were behind the scenes, so we could see sort of the two things going on. The DJ calling for the bride to come up and speak, and what the bride was actually busy occupying himself with.
Wildlife.
But from a hotel manager point of view, we'd taken on quite a few extra staff from a local extras agency that apparently we'd used before, in order to kind of have enough table service and so on. And all of the staff, without exception, these extras all turn up in like a couple of these local minibuses, and they're all carrying these kind of 3-litre or 2-litre bottles of Coke or Fanta. And I'm like, okay, well, we of course would have provided, refreshments as the staff need, etc. But and again, I didn't know any better. And then once the whole thing had finished and it all wrapped up, I know it was probably like 1 a.m. So I was still outside as we were kind of breaking down, the stage and a bunch of other things, trying to make sure that it was done silently so we didn't disturb the wedding party and a bunch of other things. And the extras were starting to kind of leave, and they started clanking as they were walking out the kind of the staff entrance. I was like, what the hell's that? And basically, they'd tied string inside their trousers in through their belt, and they had strings running down their legs, and they'd basically taken knives and forks and cutlery,
really
attached it to the string,
right,
and they were basically just
taking them,
walking out the back door, so to speak,
right.
And then they were going round the wall, because the Casbah was in this this mud kind of wall, and they're going around the wall, and they were picking up the bottles that they'd brought in, because in effect they'd basically got one of our staff to fill the bottles with alcohol,
right,
and the bottles bounce, hence why they needed the plastic bottles,
right,
and they were lobbing the bottles over the wall.
You've got a 10 out of 10 for ingenuity, right?
So things like that. I'm sure a much more experienced GM, who'd gone through and had the experience. But we actually, at one point, talking of ingenuity, we had Right Said Fred staying with us.
Right.
Nicest guy in the world.
Yeah. I've heard that actually. I've got that. Yeah, I can't remember from where. But
they were with us for a week. I think we actually gave him food poisoning, which sort of tried to suggest it might have been when he went to the market to flash Malfana at the local market. But so he wasn't feeling very well for a couple of days. So apologies in retrospect. But I remember, I think one of his last days with us, I got down to reception about 6:30 or something, and the phone was ringing on the reception. And when I say reception, there was no one there until I turned up, and then the receptionist would come, about 7:15 or 7:30 or something like that.
Yeah.
So the phone was buzzing, so I pick up the phone, and it's Right Said Fred. And he's like, look, I'm really sorry to bother you. He said, but I'd asked for an early breakfast, and which is great, and it came on time.
I thought you were going to say, and I'm still waiting.
Exactly, which is sort of what I thought.
Yeah.
But he said, no, he said, but just 2 things. He said, I'd asked if you had any cigarettes around. I'm not sure if I should say that he smoked, but anyway, so I think him or someone else wanted some cigarettes. And he said, also, you gave me tea leaves, which is very nice. He said, I just wondered if you had tea bags, though, because I'd had tea bags the rest of the week, and I'd prefer that if that's possible. I was like, okay, let me get into it, and we'll sort it out as soon as possible. So I started from scratch, and I thought, well, cigarettes, I know they're in the safe, in the reception, so that's not an issue. So tea bags, I thought, that can't be that difficult. And we have an overnight guy. His name was Aziz. And he was quite short, a little bit hunchbacked. He was our night guy, and he was supporting like a family of 7, not just his family, but his sisters, his brothers, the whole shop. Yeah. Worked himself to the bone. Was the most reliable person you could ever wish for. And he would always, try and be there. And so, he even actually, I think he walked to the hotel, 20 miles every day.
Right.
Yeah, so he was really,
Yeah.
And so I walk into the kitchen saying, Aziz, what's going on? And I go in there, and we have the housekeeper is in the ironing board, and Aziz is kind of watching her intently. I'm like, Aziz, what's happening? Where's the tea bag? Where are the cigarettes? And so on. He said, the guest asked me for the tea bags, but we'd run out of tea bags. I'm like, okay, well, you can tell him that. He's like, well, no, it's okay. He said, I got into the bins and I found some tea bags from yesterday. He said, so I cut the tea bags open, took out the tea leaves, washed the tea bags, put the tea leaves in the tea bags, and then got the housekeeper to iron the tea bags and sew them up.
Right.
And so he was in the process of waiting for the housekeeper just to iron the tea bag just before she finished, and then sew up the tea leaves in the tea bag to take to the guest.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, so I sort of took the tea bags and these new tea bags and the cigarettes to Sir Fred, and told him a little story, and he was like, okay.
Maybe I'll have coffee tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So that was sort of my first experience, sort of trial by fire. And then, even though I then went back into telecoms and lived abroad, so I spent 3.5 years in Belgium, I was in Italy, I lived in Barbados for most of a year, 14 years in Monaco, but traveling all around.
Been around.
Yeah, I think I've done it over 100, if not over 120 countries.
Best role in the world, yes.
Thank you for that. Yes, exactly. No, so I've covered West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, Asia, Middle East, most of Europe. So I've travelled an enormous amount, and for much of the time with my ex-wife, she was also writing reviews, so she would write for Financial Times, Telegraph, a lot of the major newspapers, and then also was writing travel books, especially in the south of France, where she's an expert in Monaco and that region. So we spent a lot of time visiting kitchens in restaurants, the restaurants themselves, hotels. So I've sort of by hook or by crook, I've seen the hospitality industry from a lot of different
all angles.
Yeah, from a lot of different angles.
Yeah,
and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
and I'm so respectful. When I see an operation run well, and when I see, whether it be, good senior management or great teams, in fact, actually, it's easier to tell how good a place is from the teams.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because if they're doing it well, it's not just because they may happen to be someone exceptional, but chances are it's because they've got the infrastructure in place, they've got the support, the service, the right mentality in place. I mean, we work with exclusive hotels. And Danny and Gaius and the teams in their hotels, and they're class acts.
Yeah. And
you can see, and also, they've got a very strong sustainability and kind of circular economy, view of the world, a B Corp, and so on. But you can see it's inbuilt into the way they think, the way they operate. They take quite a long-term view.
Yeah.
Which, I remember Gaius was talking about the fact that, they have really expensive toilet paper, it just completely blows his budget, because it's completely environmentally, sustainable and ticks all the right boxes. However, the guests love it. And it's a really obvious and apparent way of demonstrating to the guests that they're taking it seriously.
I'm a total fanboy of Danny Pecorelli and everything that they're doing at Exclusive. And I remember Danny talking about, not specifically toilet paper, but that long-term view is that, it's one thing to want to be sustainable and to be that way focused, think about the planet. But there is also the other element where you have to think about the guest, and the two have taken quite a long time to come together. I think in terms of what would be perceived as a luxury product, but can still be sustainable. Yeah. And I know he's kind of leading the way, really.
They really are, and you can sense it. And even Sue Williams, who's done amazing work at Watley Manor, and has now got the Lifetime Achievement Award, just recently from Hotspur. Again, they're often making decisions which at the time they're kind of pushing the envelope, and it's a challenge. How do I get that into my budget? How do I, educate, the team, the people? How do I kind of, help the customer understand the reason why we're doing it, and as part of their, in their interest. But in retrospect, you look back and think that was a great thing to do. That was a smart thing to do. Yeah. But there's always a balance. You've still got to meet the budget. Yeah. When labour costs are going up, when taxes are going up, when we had the whole COVID, period of time. So the industry is a bit bruised and battered. And I think, therefore, visionary leaders like you don't come across them every day. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things I do like about electric vehicle charging, is that it's a relatively low-hanging fruit. I think we're past the kind of single-use kind of, shampoos and gels, and some of the, that stuff. I mean, most places are doing that, and they've gone past that, because actually the guests actually much prefer having the thing in the shower with a full stock. And now it's getting harder. But even with the hard stuff, actually electric vehicle charging, relatively speaking, is quite easy. And I say that in the sense that it's in the car park. So it's not really impacting the infrastructure of the building, etc. In many cases, we might put in our own grid connection, or we could pull off a local supplier off the hotel, depending on what the need is. But it's relatively discreet. When you start getting into things like putting in heat pumps, or putting in really super efficient cooling, other things, you're starting to quite heavily impact the infrastructure of the building. Yeah, and that gets that big investment. It's probably more difficult to find people to fund those type of projects, because of long-term payback. Whereas with electric vehicle charging, there's a lot more organisations like ourselves who are ready to come in to fund and so on. So I think, EV charging is one of the relatively low-hanging fruit. I think probably for hotels, I think there's a mindset. Partly is, not that many people who are involved in the procurement decisions, whether it be, the kind of facilities directors, the GMs themselves, and so on. Not that many are actually EV drivers themselves yet. So it's difficult to buy something you don't fully understand. Yeah. They're very intuitive. They'll understand that there's a client demand, but they won't necessarily understand the difference between what's fast versus slow, or why wouldn't the one down the road do just as well. But I think that will change pretty quickly.
It sounds like it, especially with the stats that you were saying earlier on around the current percentages of uptake, and that figure is only going up, right? I mean, and has to, because as we sit today, the targets to get combustion engines, new combustion engine cars will cease to exist in 2030, is it?
So it was 2030, then it got pushed back to 2035. Now it's been brought back, in principle, I think it's been brought back to 2030, but I think with a little bit of flexibility. So it's 80% have to be full electric, so proper electric only, and maybe 20% can be much, let's say, hybrids, but not the hybrids we see today, much more basically electric with a bit of hybrid. Right. However, I actually don't think it's, at this point, I think we're past the regulation driving it.
Right. Okay. You feel like consumer is going to start driving it.
Yeah. I think when as long as this year we see all the more cost-effective models coming in, I think the consumers, as soon as people start getting electric vehicles, and whether it be one because they've rented it for a weekend or for a business trip, whether it be because a friend has got one, or whether it be just because they visit a dealership and take it for a test drive, the minute people start doing that, and then they say, oh yeah, but isn't it a pain, to go and charge it? No, not at all. I thought that for the first week, but no. Yeah. So as soon as that's happening, it's just like, I remember, from my time in telecoms, we were building all this fiber infrastructure and this capacity and satellites and subsea cables and all these things across the world, waiting for, what we call the killer app, which is, we thought might be, what is today would say Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like, video streaming or something like that, that was going to soak up, that just needs shed loads of bandwidth. Yeah. And this is, in the 2000s. So everyone was building all this infrastructure. And actually, there wasn't one killer app that came along. What came along was the iPhone. Right, okay. And the iPhone just housed lots of apps. Yeah. None of them at that time a killer app, but lots of apps in a really easy, way to use it. And that actually became the game changer. Right. And actually the killer app, so to speak, came later, when you did get things that took a lot of bandwidth. But that phone, on the mobile networks and then everything else. And I think it's the same with, if you look at the way Steve Jobs almost looked at it from the perspective of the customer and said, okay, what does the customer want? They don't know it quite yet, but what does they want? And then when you put it in the hand, they're like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Yeah. I've got, for my sins, I've still got, one of my 3 kids is young as an 8-year-old. But even my older kids, literally by the time they're 4, they know how to poke around on an iPad and, and get a video up or play a game. And and that's my view of electric vehicles.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, they're just fundamentally, they're the next generation product. And I just, yes, it's been kind of coated in this whole sustainability and emissions and air quality story, which is where the governments have driven in because it's a relatively low hanging fruit for them. But for me, it's just more fundamentally, it's just a better product.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Let me tell you why I recommend Pact's coffee subscriptions. As someone who lives for great tasting coffee but whose day-to-day schedule varies wildly, I just don't think you can top Pact. It's the most flexible subscription around. You can get unbelievably unique and great tasting coffee delivered directly to you at a frequency that fits around your life, whether that's every day, every other day, or even every other month. And it's fantastic value for money. And to cement that statement, Pact are offering Hospitality Meets listeners 25% off their first, third and fifth orders. All you have to do is sign up to a subscription at pactcoffee.com and enter the code HospitalityMeets at the checkout. And details of this will also be in the show notes and our newsletter, so be sure to sign up to that. But for now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier on, when there's so many moving parts in a combustion engine, so many things that can go wrong, I suppose, especially later in life of that engine, whereas what you're talking about is such a simple powertrain, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I mean, Dyson was looking at getting into electric vehicles.
Right.
Because he's like, well, actually, there's about as many parts in a Hoover as there are in electric vehicles.
Right.
And he's not wrong.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting. People talk about, there's a lot of, what's it called, false news or a lot of myths, they're around, I think a lot of them propelled by or kind of pushed by people with vested interests on the other side. And obviously I have a vested interest in one direction, clearly. But a lot of them, pushed by the oil and gas companies or the car companies who aren't really ready for the transition. And you hear things like, well, but we've got to dig out all the minerals, to make the batteries.
I was going to ask you this, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to go there, but you've gone there. So yeah, because this is one of the myths, right? That everybody talks about. Yeah, but you talk about a sustainable thing, but look what's happening at the other end. It's the same. I suppose the same argument in food would be with avocados, right? The principle of avocados are not indigenous to us, so we have to ship them over.
Yeah.
The quantity of water that's required to create avocado is not just and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of avocado-hating people out there, but
I like a good avocado myself, to be honest.
Same. But that is an argument that has come up, and I've seen that around about the fact that that's in itself not sustainable because do we have enough lithium or other factors in building a battery to be able to make it a sustainable thing that is part of our everyday life?
So I mean, the people aren't wrong in the sense that building renewable infrastructure, whether that be the wind turbines, the solar panels, the batteries, the car batteries, and so on, requires critical minerals, precious minerals, whatever you want to term them. But actually, as does building a petrol or diesel engine,
right? Platinum
and a whole bunch of other different, sometimes many cases different minerals.
Yeah.
But they were all required as well.
Well, let's think about 3 years ago, there was because of the knock-on effect from COVID and not being able to mine properly or something like that, there was a microchip shortage, which led to a 9-month delay in my own car. So, but anyway.
Yeah. No, so absolutely, these things require materials to build them. Slightly different materials. But the thing is, petrol and diesel cars, they required a lot of materials anyway themselves. And also, when you're mining for oil and gas in the sea, on land, or fracking, for shale gas, that is an enormous impact. And that's continually happening because every time you fill up your tank, you have to go and get more oil or gas, depending, where you get it from. Mm. Whereas what's interesting about the renewable transition is, yes, there's an upfront build cost. But for example, batteries. So people often say, the battery, when it's finished, will get thrown away. Yeah, and we've got to start again. Well, that's not the truth. So batteries are more than 90% recyclable.
Right, okay.
And actually their life, people say, oh, the battery, you're going to have to replace it in 4 years, and that's most of the cost of the car. Well, actually, we're seeing Teslas still on the road 10 years later that have still, got, 70 or 80% of their range left. And, those batteries, I mean, there's a whole industry set up either to use those second life batteries for energy storage for the grid or to recycle them. And both those industries are struggling because the batteries aren't coming through.
Right.
Because they're lasting so long.
Right.
It's somewhat like solar panels. Everyone thought solar panels, the last 10, 12, 15 years. They're lasting 25 years.
Right.
So they last a lot longer than people expected. If things do go wrong, often it's just a cell within the whole battery. And actually that's just a swap out job. Mm. And then when you recycle them, you recover 90% of the important stuff. And actually that 90% will make you a battery that's actually bigger and has more capacity than the original one that the 100% made 15 years beforehand.
Because the tech has moved.
Because the tech's moved on.
Yeah. Right.
So the interesting thing about, and this is broader than just electric vehicles, but the interesting thing about the energy transition is there is an upfront capital investment. However, you then barely have any operating costs past that.
Right, yeah.
Whereas the current view is we're just, yes, there's still the upfront capital investment, but then we're still paying every single day of the week. Mm. So if you look at, it's also in the question of efficiency. So, putting petrol in a motor, a small motor, is not a particularly efficient way of creating traction. It's a relatively inefficient because you're doing it at a tiny scale.
Yeah.
And as efficient as motors may be, it's still, compared to, let's say, a big gas power station or something, it's a very inefficient way of creating energy.
And how old is combustion technology now anyway, right? I mean, that was one of the original movement technologies, if that is even how you classify it. But that's got to be going back to like 20s, 30s?
And no, way before, even before. So all to make a point, the efficiency, by its nature, the efficiency of taking, wind, electricity, wherever it comes from, even if it's produced by gas, but taking electricity and putting it into a battery and then getting the car to move is just fundamentally multiples more efficient.
Yeah. Than
actually moving petrol around and diesel around, which is which isn't half as efficient because then you're creating electricity to turn the engine, but on site.
Well, and plus you have to
at micro level
petrol from one place to the other place in order to then deliver it.
Which is one of the many problems with hydrogen. If anyone says hydrogen to you for anything like cars or heating, walk a million miles away.
I remember seeing James May do a piece on that on Top Gear many moons ago, and being like, oh, "Wow, that looks amazing."
So interesting. You talk about the start of the combustion engine. So if you actually go back, the first real cars in America, when horse-drawn carts were getting phased out, were actually electric.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that right? I did not know that.
So the electric car was the first thing because logically, they had power, Edison and all that good stuff, and electricity. And so that, if you take photos of New York and you've got the horses still there, and you start seeing the odd car appear, they're electric cars.
Right.
The reason they never quite took off was because back in those days, the grid in America wasn't sufficiently dense that you could have got electricity to all the locations where the cars might want to go.
Right.
Whereas you could transport petrol around. Mm-hmm. And America had lots of petrol in Texas and various other places, or oil. So that's why the electric vehicle, because the grid wasn't existing in those days, became the de facto standard. Whereas, ironically, if the grid had existed like it does today, we'd have never even known the petrol car.
Isn't that mad? Yeah.
Yeah. So I get people. I had a lady the other day who said to me, we were sitting down, and to be fair, she's a bit of a hydrogen proponent, and she's like, okay, but I mean, ambulances, can't be electric. I'm like, why can't they be electric? She's like, well, because they've got lots of kit in the back that's electrical. You need lighting and kind of all the medical kit that you need.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but an electric vehicle has a massive great battery sitting underneath it. I mean, it's got more power. You could power your house by, by plugging it in.
Yeah. And generally speaking, ambulances do short runs only anyway. In terms, it's not like they're traveling 150 miles to pick up somebody. It's somebody on the locality, isn't it?
But even long runs. People are saying, oh well, we're still going to use hydrogen for buses or for trucks or for diggers. And actually, what's happening very, very quickly is that's becoming blatantly obvious that even those use cases are going to be electrified.
Right.
Hydrogen is just not even going to get traction there now. It's just because the cost of batteries is, like the cost of solar panels is dropping, every day, and not just dropping kind of the physical cost, but the cost per bit of storage, so to speak. So that the capacity against cost is dropping consistently, and that eventually will find a plateau. but we've still got a way to go. And the cost of the materials, as the volume of, as that whole part of the supply chain becomes more efficient, there's more demand and so on. So that's becoming more stable, etc. So the cost of electric vehicles is just going to be a one-way journey.
Yeah.
So better car, getting cheaper and less operating costs.
Same with phones and computers. Initially they come out, they're expensive, tech gets better, price comes down, or tech gets better and sustains.
Yeah.
Either way, that's a win, right? I mean,
Completely. I mean, from my perspective, actually, I would like, ironically, even though I run a charging business, I would actually like, even in the world of EV, I would like to see less cars on the road, not more cars on the road.
Right.
Being a city kind of dweller, when I came back to the UK just over 10 years ago, for the first 7 years, I didn't even have a car. I would actually go around on my electric scooter.
Right.
I'd commute. My offices were in Hammersmith in those days. Now
That's
they're in
an
Victoria.
EV of some kind.
Well, it is exactly. I used to get my whole family on it. I've got a photo of me, my girlfriend, and 3 kids, all kind of stuck on this little scooter. And they needed some regulation around that, and probably still needs a bit more regulation about using bike lanes and the like. But I think active travel, whether that be using bikes or if you have to, electric bikes, or just walking. I walk into the office most mornings, and so on. I think that is a great thing, and equally public transport, really, really important. If you can give people an option. Part of the problem with public transport is become very expensive to do long train journeys, and so people get comfortable with their car and things like that. The electric vehicle is the vehicle of the future, and I think that train has gone. What would be nice is if now the focus becomes on saying, okay, how can we use those vehicles in the most efficient way possible, to suit our lifestyles, but also just to take congestion off the roads and to produce maybe a number of minerals that need to be dug out of the ground, or and so on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really know what to expect today, to be honest, with our chat. I feel like we're about to renew our car, so I feel like I'm going to cancel that contract and just get an EV. But is there anything we're leaving out there? Have we covered everything that you feel you would like to cover? I mean, we could talk about Raw actually in a bit more specificity, in the sense of what's your direction of travel at the moment in terms of what are the next steps for Raw?
So thank you for the question. I don't think the intention of this podcast was really to sort of pitch what Raw, but I mean, just to give you that in a nutshell. So I think when I joined the company a couple of years ago, I think the sector at that point, everyone was trying to be everything to everybody. And what I loved about Raw when I came and took over the company was they actually already had some really good credentials in the leisure, hospitality, and retail space. So people, as I mentioned, like MacArthur Glen, National Trust. We've just been awarded contracts with some of the other big destination locations with nature-based and historic elements. Merlin Entertainments, exclusive hotels. We did work with Bespoke. We've got quite a few other contracts coming down the pipeline. So what I like, so I actually almost took us back to our roots and said, actually, this is a segment. It's a great segment. It's a really good demonstration of why the use case fitting naturally into the journey of the customer, the visitor, with our hosts. So we are completely dedicated to that sector. We're probably actually the only company in the market that only does those 3 segments, or 4 segments, so to speak. And that means that we don't see, when we look at yes, our end customer, so to speak, is the driver, because they pay the bill. However, we very much see our host as a really important, our partner, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because we know that if we only focus on the driver story, they might have a good charging experience. But if that doesn't fit into their experience with the hotel or the restaurant or whatever, then we're sub-optimizing. For me, the perfect driver experience is they barely even notice that they've charged in their car.
Yeah.
It's so seamless that actually they're getting on about enjoying the hotel, or getting into the hotel, or getting to their computer, or getting to the bar, or getting to the gym. Because going forward, the first touch point that electric vehicle driver will have with the hotel won't be the reception. It will be the charge point.
Of course it will, yeah.
So we basically developed reservations technology, so people can actually reserve the charge point before they arrive.
Right.
Because it's one thing to know your hotel's got a charger. It's another thing to say, actually, can I book it?
Yeah.
And if people have got events, so if there's a company with an EV fleet policy, they want to know that they have an event for 20 of their team. They want to know that they've got some charge points reserved.
Yeah.
So we've been developing that. We've actually got our first trials up and running at a wedding venue in Wetherby near Leeds, and we drove that because of the customer journey. Because we recognised that it's good to know that you've got charging, but you actually need to also want to know that you could reserve it.
Yeah.
likewise, all our charge points, so ChargePoint is our technology partner, they're all contactless, regardless of what the speed is. So even where the regulations don't require it, ours are all contactless. So it means that you don't have to download an app. You can just literally pull out your credit card, tap, and you're charging.
Right.
Yeah, because it's a seamless customer journey.
Yeah. And that's, that's at the heart of everything, I suppose, in the end, is especially when you're talking about this being part of the guest journey in a hospitality environment. And as you quite rightly say, if we pick on exclusive again, I am pretty sure that Danny at some point would have thought about this as being, this is all part of the same journey for our guest as soon as they arrive. And as you say, that's now the first touch point.
Yeah. Outside of the digital touch point when they make the reservation or maybe the phone and so on, the actual first in kind of, so we're working with Neil from Leapstone. He was head of service design for British Airways, looking when they did the flatbed, introduced flatbeds in business class. And he's been working also on the train network. So he's working with us to, again, look at how we can yet further improve that end-to-end service experience, because it's a mixture of service and hardware, technology and the customer journey. Yep. So we're doubling down on how we understand that bit of the journey. And we're also looking at things like, well, if someone's reserved a charge point, naturally, when they arrive, we know they've arrived. So we can almost notify reception, say, do you know Mr. and Mrs. Smith have just turned up?
Yeah.
Do you want to send a concierge out to help them with the bags?
Yeah, I mean, that takes it up a notch, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, our chargers, they're all what are called tethered, which means they actually come with a cable attached to the charger. So you don't need to use your own cable. Because if you think about it, you turn up at a hotel, or if you turn up even at Merlin, you've got kids in the back, you've got suitcases, your cables tucked under there, and so you're in the dark trying to open your thing. It might be raining, you're trying to find your bloody cable, it's wet, and so on. Whereas actually, with our chargers, literally, you come along, grab it, plug it straight in.
Nice.
And again, but it's driving a better guest experience.
Yeah.
Which we know is good for us because we'll get better utilization. Yeah, because people are like, oh, they've got raw charging, etc. And we've just, how important those partners are. So we've just introduced, actually, we just did the first survey working with investor and customers who basically do NPS and Net Promoter Scores. And we've just done our first survey about a month and a half ago. And we've just been given the Gold Award by them. I still think we've got a lot to improve. And, and we know where to improve because that survey's helped us. But I'm still delighted that, our host, our partners, do believe the one thing they really believe in is that we understand, what they're focused on, which is their customer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Merlin, for example, I didn't even realize this till we started working with them. I started getting involved. If it rains when you're one of the Merlin parks, you get your money back.
I didn't know that.
And I don't know, maybe there's a policy around it.
Yeah, it would be like the same as cricket, right? There's only 20 overs played.
Exactly.
Yeah, you only get 2 hours then.
But fundamentally, so we're sitting there thinking, well, actually, is there anything we could do to maybe dovetail in with their approach?
Right.
So I mean, we haven't kind of followed it through that discussion. We're discussing a few other things with them, but I'm sitting there thinking, well, actually, if someone has come there charged, it's a bit of a wasted trip because it's a half day and so on. Do we maybe give them a discount if they come back and charge again?
Yeah.
We're working with one of the big horticultural organisations. We just, we won a tender on that, and they're saying, well, what can we do working with their members? National Trust. We've I don't know how many sites we've rolled out now, but I think we're 30, 40 through 150, site rollout. And again, they've been great partners. Strong sustainability, environmental agenda, really, really good, program management, project management skills, and, but in a very specific context. Historic houses, planning issues, grade listed buildings, etc. But if you can build those partnerships and do it in the right way, and you understand their situation, boy, does it make, everyone's lives better. So we're still trying to improve every day. I wish we were perfect. I wish I was actually losing some of the weight that when I was first working at that hotel in Morocco.
Not got enough stress in your job.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we are at the tipping point for EVs. I think there is a bit of a wake up call for hotels. I would say hotels are behind the curve.
Yeah. Yeah,
and some of the ones that have gone ahead, they've actually probably gone for rapids because they've been offered money, quite a bit of money to try and do that. But actually, that's not the right use case. That's not for that's not for their guests. That's just for passing traffic. Yeah, I'm not sure really what it brings to them. Yeah, we can do that as well. We do it occasionally, and that's fine if that's the journey. But for me, it's really about saying you've got guests. If you've got a 100-bedroom hotel today, I guarantee you today you will have 5 EVs in your parking, and in 5 years' time, that's going to be 30 EVs. And unless you want all those EV drivers either spending a lot of money on the motorway or having to go down the road to in the middle of the night or when they really don't want to be out, instead of being in your nice, warm, cozy hotel doing what they want to do. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who need to wake up and start getting on that journey. And by the way, ticking the box, help sustainability, and think of your kids and your grandkids, with air pollution and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And your scope 3 emissions and a whole bunch of other things. So it's a low-hanging fruit. The solutions are there in the industry now. And I think my gut feeling is we'll start seeing the hotel industry really move quite fast in this. And I think some people will try and do it themselves. All good hoteliers want to kind of, if they can do it themselves, they like to have a shot at it.
Yeah.
But I think they'll quickly realise, the regulations now, you need to have 99% uptime, you need 24/7 call line, you need to have contactless. There's so many regulations now to protect the consumer, to make sure the driver gets a good experience, which is good because...
Yeah, and you get more uptake as a result.
They'll get more uptake and blah, blah, blah. But if you're... And you might be able to get away with a really, really slow charger that's stuck on your wall for a couple of years. But it'll be very quickly become, apparent that ain't going to...
That will start appearing in TripAdvisor reviews.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get a 1-star rating even for your customers even walked in the reception.
Yeah. No, indeed. Thank you so much. This has been a really educational experience for me. Really, really good to have a chat. I wish you guys all the very best with the next phase, whatever that looks like. And really, really appreciate you making time for this chat today.
Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure. Nice way to start the year.
Yeah.
And look forward to anyone who wants to ask any questions. We're always open to help.
Fantastic. And thank you for the second bar of chocolate.
Pleasure. Take care.
And there we have it. It was superb to get some time with Jason, and I for one took an awful lot of learning away with me, and what a great story he has so far as well. It's such a great example of the diversity of opportunity in and around hospitality. We'll be back again next Wednesday 8 PM with another story from hospitality, so have a great week and I'll see you then.